What if the sweetest harmonies of the 1960s hid allegations of incest, addiction, and abuse that would surface decades later and permanently destroy a musical legacy? At their peak, they defined an era. #1 hits, Grammy Awards, songs that sounded like freedom pouring out of car radios across America. Behind the scenes, the reality was far darker. Drugs erased boundaries, power replaced trust, and long after the music stopped, family members came forward with accusations so disturbing they forced fans to question everything they believed about the band. Before we go any further, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more untold stories from music history. This is the rise and fall of the Mamas and the Papas. Los Angeles, 1965. The city was becoming the centre of the musical universe. New bands arrived every week, chasing record deals, chasing freedom, chasing the idea that California wasn't just a place, but a promise. In this moment, folk music was changing. What had started as coffee house confessionals was being electrified, polished, and pushed toward the mainstream. Harmony mattered again. Image mattered. Personality mattered. And one man believed he could control all three. His name was John Phillips. Phillips was brilliant, disciplined, and intensely ambitious. He understood structure, he understood melody, and more than anything, he understood how power worked inside a band. Before the world knew his name, Phillips had already failed once. His earlier group, the Journeymen, showed promise but never broke through. The music industry was ruthless, and second chances were rare. Phillips wasn't going to miss another one. He believed the key wasn't just talent, it was control. Control over sound, control over image, control over the people around him. That belief would build something extraordinary, and it would eventually poison everything. Phillips needed voices, not just good voices, distinct ones. He found one in Denny Doherty, a Canadian vocalist with emotional range and a soft vulnerability that contrasted perfectly with Phillips's authority. Doherty had the voice of a romantic. Phillips had the mind of a general. It was a dangerous combination. Then came Cass Elliot. Cass Elliot did not look like a pop star by 1965 standards. But when she sang, none of that mattered. Her voice was massive, warm, commanding, effortless. She could fill a room without trying. Elliot had already been suckling the folk scene for years, often overlooked, often underestimated. She was used to being the outsider. What she wanted most was to belong. Finally, there was Michelle Phillips. Michelle was young, beautiful, inexperienced musically. She also happened to be John Phillips's wife. From the beginning, her presence inside the group blurred every possible boundary. Personal, professional, emotional. Phillips insisted she belonged, not because she was the strongest singer, but because he needed her close. The four voices came together almost accidentally. During rehearsals, something unexpected happened. The harmonies locked. Not politely, not cautiously, perfectly. Four voices weaving together in a way that felt effortless, almost inevitable. It was the kind of sound that makes people stop talking mid-sentence. They knew immediately they had something rare. They also ignored the warning signs. The name came from the counterculture itself. Papas and mamas were slang used by bikers and hippies to describe men and women within their communities. The name felt casual, warm, communal. The mamas and the papas. It suggested family, unity, equality. The irony would come later. In 1965, they signed with Dunhill Records. Within months, they were recording material that captured exactly what young America wanted to hear. Escape, longing, sunshine mixed with loneliness. Then came the song that changed everything. California Dreamin. Released in late 1965, the song didn't just chart, it exploded. The harmonies felt like winter melting into warmth. The lyrics captured a specific emotional ache felt by an entire generation. It wasn't just about California. It was about wanting something better. The song climbed the charts and turned the group into stars almost overnight. For the first time, John Phillips had what he always wanted: success, money, validation, and leverage. Their debut album, If You Can Believe Your Eyes and Ears, arrived in 1966. It produced hit after hit. Suddenly, the band was everywhere. Television appearances, sold-out shows, magazine covers. They looked like the perfect representation of the era. Young, free, harmonious. But beneath the surface, the power imbalance was already set. John Phillips made the decisions. He chose the songs. He controlled the arrangements. He dictated the direction. The others followed. At first, no one objected. Success has a way of quieting doubts, but success also amplifies flaws. As the fame increased, so did the pressure. Touring schedules intensified. Access to drugs became effortless. Hollywood doors swung open. And the boundaries between personal lives and professional obligations began to dissolve. Phillips kept Michelle close. Too close. He insisted she remain part of the group, even as tensions grew and relationships inside the band became increasingly complicated. Doherty developed feelings for Michelle. Cass Elliot watched from the sidelines, emotionally invested in a man who did not return her affection. John Phillips, meanwhile, exercised control with a smile. On stage, they sang about love. Backstage, jealousy and resentment simmered. The dream was still alive, but the warning signs were already there, and the worst was still coming. By late 1965, the Mamas and the Papas were no longer an experiment. They were a phenomenon. California Dreamin' raced up the charts and became one of the defining songs of the decade, peaking inside the top 5 and selling over 1 million copies. It captured longing, warmth, and escape in a way few records ever had. The success was immediate and overwhelming. Their debut album, If You Can Believe Your Eyes and Ears, released in 1966, confirmed that the hit was not a fluke. The record reached number 1 on the Billboard album chart and stayed there for weeks. It produced multiple hit singles and turned the group into one of the most reliable chart forces in American music. California Dreamin' became unavoidable. It dominated radio, crossed generational lines, and positioned the band as leaders of the new folk rock movement. The harmonies felt effortless, but they were meticulously arranged. John Phillips' songwriting and control over structure proved commercially lethal. Then came Monday, Monday.
Monday morning, it was all I hoped it would be.
Released in 1966, the song climbed all the way to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100.
Oh, Monday morning, couldn't guarantee.
And earned the group a Grammy Award for Best Pop Performance by a Group. It remains the only song ever to hit number 1 that uses a title repeating the same word. The band had now achieved the highest validation possible. They were no longer newcomers. They were elite. Their second album, The Mamas and the Papas, arrived later that same year and reached number 4 on the album chart. It delivered more hits, including I Saw Her Again, which cracked the top 5 despite a famously unedited studio false start left in the final mix. What would have ruined another band only added to their charm. By 1967, the group was operating at full velocity. Their third album, Deliver, reached the top 10 and expanded their sound without sacrificing accessibility. Songs like Dedicated to the One I Love and Creek Alley showcased both emotional intimacy and autobiographical storytelling.
John and Mitchie were getting kind of itchy just to leave the folk music behind.
Creek Alley in particular functioned as a self-mythologizing anthem.
Saul and Denny working for a penny, trying to get a fish on the line.
Cementing their own origin story in pop history. They were now a touring juggernaut. Television appearances became routine. They performed on the biggest variety shows in America. International invitations followed, including high-profile appearances that confirmed their global reach. Few American groups moved from folk clubs to world stages so quickly. Their fourth album, The Papas and the Mamas, released in 1968, produced one of their biggest hits. 12:30, also known as Young Girls Are Coming to the Canyon, reached the top 20 and became another staple of late 60s radio. Even as internal strain grew, the commercial engine kept running. At their peak, the Mamas and the Papas placed multiple singles in the top 10, earned gold records, won major awards, and dominated AM radio. Their songs were optimistic without being naive, sophisticated without being cold. They were trusted by audiences. For a brief moment, everything aligned. The culture wanted harmony. The industry wanted hits. The band delivered both. Their sound became shorthand for California itself. Sunshine filtered through melancholy. Freedom with an undercurrent of yearning. From 1965 through 1967, they were one of the most successful vocal groups in America. Few bands reached that level of saturation so quickly. Fewer still sounded so effortless doing it. But success came at a cost. The pace was relentless. Albums had to follow albums. Hit touring never slowed. Expectations only increased. The machine demanded perfection without pause. On the surface, the Mamas and the Papas had achieved everything they set out to do. They had money, fame, respect, and cultural relevance. Behind the curtain, pressure was building. And the same forces that had lifted them to the top were quietly preparing the collapse. By 1968, the harmony that had made the group famous existed only when the microphones were on. Offstage, the band was disintegrating. Fame didn't soften their problems, it magnified them. Every unresolved tension was now amplified by money, access, and constant scrutiny. John Phillips's leadership had hardened into domination. What once felt like direction became control. Decisions were no longer debated, they were issued. Questioning him was treated as betrayal. The more unstable the band grew, the more aggressively he asserted authority. Michelle Phillips became the flashpoint. Her affair with Denny Doherty crossed every remaining boundary at once, personal and professional. When John Phillips discovered it, his response was swift and public. Michelle was expelled from the band. The move was framed as discipline. In reality, it was humiliation. It destabilised the group and confirmed what everyone already suspected. Power inside the Mamas and the Papas belonged to one man. Michelle eventually returned, but nothing returned to normal. Trust was gone. Cass Elliot watched the implosion while carrying her own quiet pain. Her voice was essential to the band's sound, yet her emotional needs were sidelined. She loved Doherty. He did not love her back. Each rehearsal reinforced the same truth. She was indispensable, but never protected. As tensions mounted, drugs stopped being indulgence and became infrastructure. Cocaine sharpened paranoia. LSD erased boundaries. Pills smoothed the crash. What the culture celebrated as freedom quickly turned into dependency, and no one wanted to slow the machine while the hits kept coming. Los Angeles poured gasoline on the fire. Their home became a non-stop party. Celebrities drifted in and out at all hours. Keith Richards and Mick Jagger were regular presences. Members of the Beatles passed through. The scene blurred music, fame, and excess into a single endless night. Drugs were not hidden. They were offered openly. LSD circulated freely. Cocaine sat on tables. John Phillips's teenage daughter later said she grew up in a house where drugs, parties, and adult behaviour were constant, and where no one intervened. The rules that applied to ordinary families did not exist here. John Phillips thrived in this chaos. He believed intellect made him immune. He believed control meant safety. Both beliefs collapsed. His drug use escalated rapidly, and those around him enabled it, mistaking productivity for stability.
And no one's getting fat
Cass Elliott's health deteriorated visibly. Years of extreme dieting, driven by public scrutiny and private insecurity, weakened her body beyond recovery. She starved herself repeatedly, lost massive weight, and destroyed her strength. Hospitalizations followed. Still, she kept performing. If you've ever wondered what fame actually costs the people behind the music, pause here. And if you want the unfiltered stories, make sure you're subscribed. Her death later became the subject of cruel mythology. The false claim that she died choking on a sandwich spread quickly. The truth was quieter and harsher. She died of heart failure at 32, exhausted by illness, pressure, and neglect. Legal trouble and rumours followed the band across borders. Arrests were threatened. Charges disappeared. Drugs were dumped in panic. Nothing fully surfaced publicly, but the industry began to recognise the instability beneath the polished image. Then came the revelations that permanently reframed everything. Years after the band had collapsed, Mackenzie Phillips accused her father, John Phillips, of an incestuous sexual relationship that began when she was 19 years old, during the height of his addiction. According to her account, it did not end quickly. She claimed it continued for nearly 10 years. She described a household ruled by drugs, secrecy, and power imbalance. Narcotics erased moral boundaries. Authority replaced judgment. What should have remained unthinkable became normalised inside an environment where no limits were enforced. She further alleged the relationship ended only when she became pregnant, at which point her father ordered her to terminate the pregnancy. The abortion, she later stated, marked the end of the relationship, not recovery or reconciliation. This was not a tabloid whisper. It was a direct accusation, published under her name, repeated consistently, and corroborated by family members who later admitted they had heard similar claims years earlier. If this revelation changes how you hear the music, you're not alone. Drop your reaction in the comments. These stories matter. By the time the allegations became public, John Phillips was already unravelling. Cocaine gave way to heroin. Spending reached catastrophic levels. Rehab offered brief stability, but sobriety never held. The man who once controlled everything could no longer control himself. The band did not end with a dramatic farewell. It simply stopped. Exhaustion replaced ambition. Resentment replaced collaboration. By 1968, the Mamas and the Papas were finished. What followed was not recovery. It was fallout. Phillips spiralled deeper into addiction and legal trouble. Cass Elliott was gone. Doherty fled Los Angeles, hoping distance could save him. Michelle Phillips survived by reinventing herself outside music. If you're still watching, hit like. Stories like this survive because people choose to face the uncomfortable truth. The damage extended beyond the band. Addiction echoed through the next generation. Chaos repeated itself. The collapse did not end with the breakup. The dream was over. The consequences were permanent. The breakup of the Mamas and the Papas did not bring closure. It created silence, distance, and unfinished damage that followed every member for the rest of their lives. There was no clean separation, no shared understanding of what had gone wrong, only individuals trying to survive what remained. John Phillips attempted to continue as if the band were only a chapter, not the defining force of his life. He pursued solo projects and collaborations, but none approached the cultural impact he once commanded. Without the structure of the group, his self-discipline collapsed completely. Addiction became his central organising principle. Cocaine gave way to heroin. Spending spiralled. Friends disappeared. Legal trouble followed him from city to city. At his worst, Phillips was reportedly spending staggering sums each year simply to maintain his habit, burning through wealth that had once seemed inexhaustible. Rehabilitation offered brief moments of stability, but never lasting recovery. When the drugs loosened their grip, alcohol replaced them. Control, once his defining trait, was gone. The man who had shaped the sound of a generation could no longer manage his own life. Phillips died in the early 2000s from complications related to a liver transplant. He was 65 years old. By then, his musical achievements were inseparable from the wreckage he left behind. His legacy was no longer just about songs. it was about consequences. Cass Elliott's story ended far earlier. After the band dissolved, she finally stepped out from under its shadow. Her solo career showed real promise. She was critically respected, commercially successful, and increasingly confident in her public image. For the first time, she was being recognised on her own terms. Her body, however, never recovered from years of punishment. Extreme dieting, illness, and exhaustion had taken a permanent toll. In the mid-1970s, Cass Elliott died suddenly of heart failure while in London. She was only 32 years old. The myth that she died choking on a sandwich spread quickly and cruelly. It reduced a complex life to a punchline. The truth was quieter and far more tragic. Her heart simply gave out after years of abuse and neglect. Denny Doherty chose distance as survival. After the band's collapse, he left Los Angeles and returned to Canada, hoping geography could protect him from addiction and chaos. Music remained part of his life, but the spotlight never returned in the same way. He struggled with alcoholism for years before achieving sobriety later in life. Doherty spoke openly about regret, guilt, and the emotional damage left behind by the band. He died in the mid-2000s, far from the scene that once defined him. Michelle Phillips adapted differently. She walked away from music and rebuilt herself as an actress. Film and television offered distance from the past without requiring her to erase it. She worked steadily for decades, surviving by reinvention rather than reconciliation. Of all the members, she lived the longest with the consequences, forced to answer for the band's history long after the others were gone. The most enduring damage, however, did not belong to the band members alone. It belonged to their children. Addiction echoed through the next generation. Several of John Phillips's children struggled with substance abuse, openly acknowledging how normalised drugs had been in their childhood home. The chaos they grew up in shaped their adult lives in lasting ways. Mackenzie Phillips eventually spoke publicly about her experiences, reframing the band's story forever. Her account ensured that the legacy could never be sanitised, no matter how beloved the music remained. Not all paths repeated the cycle. China Phillips, John's daughter with Michelle, was shielded from much of the chaos. She later found success in the 1990s as part of the group Wilson Phillips, achieving commercial triumph without the destruction that defined the previous generation. By then, the Mamas and the Papas existed only as recordings. There were no reunions, no reconciliations, no shared reflections. The fractures were permanent, and too many wounds had been left untreated for too long. Their songs, however, endured. California Dreamin', Monday, Monday, and their other classics continue to live on radio, in films, and in memory. For listeners, the music still sounded like warmth, freedom, and possibility, untouched by the darkness behind it. That contrast became the band's final irony. They created some of the most comforting music of their era, while living lives defined by instability, control, and excess. Harmony was their product, not their reality. The legacy of the Mamas and the Papas is not a simple rise and fall. It is a warning about what happens when success arrives faster than self-awareness, when power goes unchecked, and when silence protects damage instead of healing it. The music survived. The people did not escape unscarred, and the cost of that harmony is still being reckoned with today. The story of the Mamas and the Papas is not just about hit songs or cultural influence. It is about what happens when success outruns accountability, when talent shields behaviour, and when silence protects damage instead of stopping it. They created some of the most comforting music of the 1960s, songs that still sound like freedom and possibility. Yet behind those harmonies were lives shaped by addiction, control, and consequences that extended far beyond the band itself. You can still love the music and confront the truth. Both can exist at the same time. If this story changed how you hear their songs, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more unfiltered music history, make sure you're subscribed.